Hey Internet! I've made comments in previous videos that might be interpreted as being critical of photography as an art form, and since I've been working with photography a lot recently, I thought I would take the opportunity to clarify my stance on the subject. To preface, I consider photography to be a crucial element in my artistic practice. More often than not, every painting I make begins life as a photograph in one form or another, and this video is by no means intended to be an assault on the field of photography. In fact, I have a lot of admiration for the discipline and those who have dedicated their lives to its practice. Likewise, I consider it to be one of the most revolutionary technologies ever invented, and one that fundamentally changed the world for the better. Photography is so ingrained in our culture and taken for granted that I literally cannot imagine a world without it. Likewise, it's arguably the most accessible form of visual expression now that just about everyone in the developed world has a camera on their person every waking moment. I have a lot of good things to say about photography, but that's not what you're here for. No, you're expecting a rant with some spicy hot takes, so what's wrong with photography? Well, my main criticism, or why I don't consider myself to be a photographer despite making it a crucial part of my artistic practice, stems from the idea that the camera is actually a very poor substitute for replicating how we experience the world. Sure, it can accurately replicate the sensation of vision, but our experience of the world consists of more than just the visual. For one, it's assumed that the camera acts as a stand-in for the eye of the artist, and that we see what the artist sees when we look at a photograph. But in reality, it's a bit more complex than that. Our eyes are more than just cameras made of flesh. Sure, the structure of the eye and the biological mechanisms that enable us to see are similar to that of a camera, but humans do not experience the visual world with the same kind of objective clarity. The human retina isn't arranged in an orderly or uniform manner like that found in film grain or the photosensor in a digital camera. The light-sensitive cells in our eyes that provide the sharpest visual acuity are mostly clustered in a small area near the center of the retina at the back of the eye. Additionally, we have a fixed field of view that averages about 120 degrees of visibility, which sounds impressive until you realize our visual span, or the actual area of sight that is in focus, represents only about 2 degrees out of the 120. For context, that's an area a little larger than the size of your thumbnail with your arm extended out front. The brain creates the illusion of having a greater visual span by unconsciously moving the center of vision into areas of interest so we perceive a seamless image. Our visual world is essentially a reconstruction made from a quick succession of mostly blurry snapshots stitched together in the mind, our brains automatically correcting for any visual discontinuities. This is partly why drawing from observation is so challenging. The eye has a tendency to dart around the object the artist wants to draw, making it difficult to get a true sense of the contours they are trying to render. Which is why if you desire to get better at drawing, spend more time looking at the thing you are drawing and less time looking at your paper. With enough practice, you can train your hand to move in concert with your eye. Because the camera doesn't have to filter information through a gelatinous-like organ that relies on illusion to make sense of the world, it has the ability to see and capture things the artist only becomes aware of much later when reviewing their photos. The camera is a machine, and its strength comes from the fact it treats all the subjects it captures as equals, and without subjective influences obscuring the outcome. However, because a camera can't think or feel, certain information beyond the objective visual experience gets lost in translation. A camera is effectively blind to the emotional and metaphysical essence of the person, place, or thing that is being photographed, and it takes an extremely talented photographer to communicate such aspects of human experience on film. Then there's the pesky problem of realism that accompanies the medium of photography. By default, it is assumed that seeing is believing, and that photographs are honest depictions of reality, despite the fact photographers have been staging scenes and using Photoshop tricks in the darkroom to alter images since the medium was first invented in the 19th century. Likewise, it is often thought the photographer's job is to choose what things should be photographed. And this is mostly true, but it could also be said that the photographer's job is choosing what not to photograph, or what to crop out or exclude from the composition before taking the shot. The painter, however, only has a choice over what to include in their composition because paintings are physically constructed through the building up of layers of paint on a surface where nothing had existed before. Moreover, photographs are moments fixed in time, stuck in the past, never changing. In contrast, paintings are living objects that grow and change over time during their development, and some would even argue that a painting is never really done, that there's always more the painter could do if desired. Even the act of erasure in painting is additive, with the artist covering the offending spot with paint, burrowing it like a fossil beneath layers of sediment, hidden from view but ever present. This is, of course, a gross oversimplification of both painting and photography, but it demonstrates the subtle conceptual differences in approach to image making between the two mediums. I'm not saying one is better than the other, just that painting feels more honest to the goals of my creative practice because it lacks the implied assumption of empiricism and embodies certain ideas about change and growth that I seek to explore through my art. Furthermore, the very presence of a camera changes how people act and behave. Actions become performative. People strike a pose, say cheese, smile, make faces, or photobomb scenes. And at the opposite end of the spectrum, throw up their hands and cover their faces and run away in horror because they are self-conscious about their image and don't want to be photographed. And just as individuals tend to behave differently when conscious of the fact they are in front of a camera, so too do people act differently when behind the lens. The camera acts like a barrier between the artist and the world they are responding to. Sure, the barrier may be a window that looks out into the world, but it still creates a separation between the artist and the experience they are documenting. Holding a camera in your hand changes how you experience and interact with the world. One becomes hyper-aware that time is not their ally, which leads to a sense of urgency and entitlement to the moment. Concepts of ownership can even be found in the language used to describe how photographs are made. You take a photo, you capture a shot. Something that was once a unique, ephemeral, one-off experience becomes something that can be possessed and traded as cultural currency or social clout. Now, I can't speak for everyone, but I feel a sense of disassociation when behind the lens. I think about and look at the world differently, as though everything outside the constrained perspective of my viewfinder ceases to exist. Like I'm stuck in a liminal bubble of my own creation that is simultaneously immersed in the moment and somehow completely detached from it, where I feel more like the director of some materialist fiction rather than an active participant in reality. So the question arises, why bother working from photographs in the first place if they are, as I claim, poor substitutes for the lived experience? Well, because I'm lazy and carrying a camera is infinitely more convenient than trouncing through the wilderness with my easel in tow like some French plein air painter from the 19th century. Truth be told, if I had it within me the ability to take a photograph of something and leave it at that, I would. But what I see and experience in my mind's eye rarely corresponds to what is captured in my photographs. And I am certain I'm not alone in thinking that. If you've ever tried to take a photo of a beautiful sunset or radiant full moon floating above the horizon, chances are you've been disappointed with the outcome too. The photo we take rarely compares to the reality we experience because the reality we experience only exists as a product of our minds. Ultimately, I am less interested in portraying the objective experience of sight, and more so with its effect on memory and emotion. I want my work to convey a certain feeling about the aspects of the world for which spoken language is ill-equipped to describe. I want to make visible the hidden dimensions of human experience that remain largely invisible to us due to their ambiguous and seemingly irrational nature. The unsettling truth is that our attempts to understand the universe through logic and reason have only revealed mysteries even more complex and incomprehensible than previously thought. But not to fear, we have another cognitive tool at our disposal that we can use to bridge gaps in understanding where logic and reason fail. Imagination. Our modern world may be one built by logic and reason, but it is built on a foundation of imagination. Our species is unique because not only can we observe and react to the world around us, but also envision things that do not exist. We create the world we live in. We shape the systems that govern society. Our ability to inspire change is only limited by what we can imagine, and we mustn't allow our imagination to be hijacked by fear of the unknown. We must reject the oppressive passivity of nostalgia and know-it-all cynicism in order to forge a new path forward. And the first step in the journey towards creating a better future is simply to imagine that one can exist. So what are you waiting for?